Good evening, I'm Rohit Sharma and welcome to Desi from DC, coming to you every night from heart of Washington. This is where America's power corridor meet India's prime time to break down the political, economic and global stories shaping both nations live from Washington D.C. From Capitol Hill to Raisana Hill, we connect the dots between what happens here in Washington and how it echoes back home in India. We begin tonight with the big stories of the day. Zohran Mamdani dominates NYC polls ahead of election day. Virginia is set to elect its first female governor, no matter who wins. High-stakes showdown in New Jersey, Cheryl versus Chittorali. Indian-American Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy slams J.D. Vance over anti-Hindu remarks. In the next 24 hours, New York City, home to about 8.5 million people, including 5.1 million registered voters, will choose its next mayor. The winner will inherit an economy worth nearly 1.3 trillion US dollars and an annual operating budget of 112 billion. At a time of rising inflation, job cuts, and signs of slowing economy, this race is unfolding in ways that feel strikingly familiar, not from American politics standpoint, but from India's. Now, vying for roughly 130,000 Indian American voters, both Mamdani and Cuomo has been pushed into full-scale community outreach, from temple visits to identity blocks, and the language of faith and belonging. The contest between Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo now looks like a lot like India's brand of communal politics, transplanted to America's biggest city for all those important Desi votes. Zohran Mamdani, a state assemblyman and self-described democratic socialist, is running to become New York's first Muslim mayor. Andrew Cuomo, on the other hand, is a former governor, is mounting or trying to mount a comeback, running as an independent with a well-oiled political machine and a deep name recognition. But beyond policy debates, it's the religious signaling and community outreach that have captured headlines. Under pressure to appeal to Hindu voters, Mamdani has been crisscrossing the city, visiting temples in Queens, the Bronx, and Long Island. He spoke of pluralism and unity, but his visits stirred controversy too. Videos showing him entering a temple wearing shoes triggered a wave of criticism online, with some Hindu groups calling it disrespectful, others defending it as political ambush. And it isn't just Mamdani. Cuomo's campaign is making its own overtures, with banners and billboards reading South Asians for Cuomo Coalition, featuring Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs, each quoted as a distinct voting bloc. There is also Hindus for Cuomo, and even aerial ads flying over Manhattan, sponsored by Indian American supporters. Political campaigning in the US has evolved to mirror a more segmented, identity-based approach. What once were broad minority blocs are now being sliced into smaller, more specific groups, defined by faith and language. From Hindus for Cuomo to Muslims against Mamdani, campaigns are no longer speaking to one community. They are tailoring messages to dozens of sub-identities within it. It's a new kind of political micro-targeting, one that recognizes the diversity within immigrant communities, but also risks deepening the very division it seeks to mobilize. Experts say that this election marks a new age of the identity vote politics in New York, where mobilization based on religion has now become mainstream strategy. Both sides building identity as a political tool. What's unfolding is more than a New York mayoral race. It's a reflection of how the American politicians across the spectrum are importing the politics of religion and identity into American democracy. Now, instead of focusing on issues that matter to local New Yorkers, the politicians in the US are injecting communal and identity politics to sway voters, upsetting Americans who are turned off by such antics. In reality, the outreach to minorities is a celebratory move. It is an acknowledgement of America's secular and democratic nature. But voters see through such optics of politicians visiting mosques, gurdwaras, and temples. The curated images, cheesy slogans, and selfies are now seen mostly as performative. If anything, the leaders from the community should ask pertinent questions and views on key issues as Americans rather than feeling content with a photo op that does nothing to improve lives of those who they claim to represent. In US, politicians line up at temples and mosques before every election. The leaders should move away from such symbolism. Seeing this play out, this race feels less like a battle over housing and transit and more like a test of which faith community can turn out stronger. So the question is, what does this mean for America's most diverse city? Are we watching deepening of divisions or the maturing of diaspora democracy? Either way, this race has become a mirror, reflecting how appealing the politics of religion can actually be. Tonight, we're speaking to Senator Gazala Hashmi, a groundbreaking figure in Virginia politics. Born in Hyderabad, India, and raised in Georgia, she made history in the 2019 as the first Muslim woman and first Indian American elected to Virginia State Senate. A former educator turned lawmaker, Senator Hashmi has been a strong voice for education, equity, inclusion, and now she's seeking to make history again. She's running to be the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. Senator Hashmi, thank you so much for joining us. The election, or the election right after the general election, the Virginia election, is considered to be bellwether as to what the mood of the nation is, what people are thinking. The polls were indicating a different story in the summer, but it looks like they're pretty close right now. What is your message to people who are either not convinced to vote for you and your party, and those independent voters that could probably be sitting on the fence to make up their mind in these last hours of campaign?
Yes, the stakes could not be higher, and the differences could not be clearer between myself and my opponent. First of all, I'm running against somebody who has very publicly shared and done so repeatedly that he wants to close every public school in Virginia. He wants to take our public education taxpayer dollars and give them into the hands of private for-profit organizations. That's a non-starter for most Virginians. He has also compared healthcare, reproductive healthcare access to slavery, and he supports the devastating HR1 bill, which has brought untold harm to hundreds of thousands of Virginians. He has fully agreed with Donald Trump that slashing Medicaid insurance and Medicaid coverage for over 300,000 Virginians is okay. Well, that's not okay with the numbers of people that I've been talking to all across the campaign. Virginians are distressed, they're angry, they're anxious. We've seen considerable harm coming because of the DOGE cuts to our federal workforce. So much of that workforce actually reside in Virginia and are Virginians. By contrast, I spent 6 years now in the Virginia Senate. I have a body of legislative work that represents my areas of focus, what I'm committed to doing, what I have already done in education, healthcare, focusing on housing affordability, food insecurity, as well as our environmental and energy needs. And so I would urge anybody to stack my credentials, the work I've already done, and compare that to my opponent who has no government experience and instead is running a campaign of bigotry and Islamophobia directed against me.
Islamophobia, and we're seeing that play out in New York too, with Zohran Mamdani's campaign. Like, America has changed, right? And what's your message to somebody who probably doesn't feel welcome in America, or who stayed in America for so many number of years and are hesitant to share their roots, be it either Indian roots or their religious roots? How, just out of all this stuff that we're seeing, uh, if there's one thing that you would want to tell to the minorities, what would that be?
Well, that was the impetus for me to run for office actually in 2019 to prove to myself that I actually belonged in this country. I'd lived here for 50 years and I needed that validation. And the fact that I was elected, that I flipped a red seat blue, and that I won a competitive seat by 10 points very much confirmed for me that people in this country and people in Virginia are genuinely focused on making sure that we continue to make progress. You know, my campaign in 2019, my tagline was Gazala Hashmi is an American name. I asked voters to help me prove that, and they did resoundingly. And that continues to give me hope for ourselves, for America, and for the communities that we build here.
All right, Senator Hashmi, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with the race. As I said, few hours, few last hours, I should say. And you made history as the first South Asian, first Indian, and first Muslim woman to be elected as senator in Richmond from Virginia. And we hope to see you break more barriers. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And for the full interview, you can go to India Today Global on YouTube and watch our exclusive interview with State Senator Ghazala Hashmi, who is running to be the Lieutenant Governor in Virginia. While the US government remains shut to seemingly local elections, the governor's race in New Jersey and Virginia are taking on outsized national significance. Now, why should the world care about this election on Tuesday? Well, because they're not just about who runs New Jersey and Virginia. They are, in fact, proxy battles over momentum, messaging, and the political climate as we head towards 2026. And yes, these outcomes now will reflect how MAGA's brand is faring as a political force. In 2025, New Jersey and Virginia are essentially the only states with high-profile governor races. That gives them special visibility. Now, if one party does well, it gets amplified in national media as a sign of broader trends. Both parties view these elections as dry runs for the 2026 midterm elections. How strongly each side turns out, how easily they can persuade independents, and how the issue lands for each of these voters will all be closely scrutinized. For Republicans, a strong showing would mean validation of Trump-aligned strategies. For Democrats, victories would suggest that Republican Party and their reliance on Trump may turn out to be a liability in swing or suburban constituencies. Governors wield real power, appointments, budgets, emergency powers, and they can shape national debates, be it education, policing, redistricting, and abortion policy. Winning governorships offers the winning party both legitimacy and policy leverage. On Virginia, the latest poll from Emerson College and The Hill finds that the candidate, Abigail Spanberger, leads Winsome Earl Sears by about 11 points, which is 55% to 44. And given Virginia's pattern of rejecting the party of the sitting president in governor's race, Spanberger is riding multiple tailwinds. However, in New Jersey, the polls are far tighter. The latest poll released by Quinnipiac this morning says that the Democratic candidate Sherrill is ahead 51% to 43, with a margin of 3.8 percentage points, which makes the race really a toss-up. Now, there is one notable dynamic. Independents in New Jersey are leaning for Citrali in some models, even while Democrats outnumber Republicans in overall likely voter composition. In short, Virginia looks leaning Democratic, perhaps safely so. New Jersey is a toss-up and will likely be decided by turnout, the persuasion of independents, and who has a better political ground game. What each side wants and what does a loss mean for both the sides. For Democrats, now in Virginia, a win would consolidate control of every top statewide office, governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. and would reinforce a message that suburban voters and moderate voters are rejecting the harder edges of Trump-aligned GOP. In New Jersey, if Democrats were to hold the governorship, that would mean that their narrative and blue wave or blue resilience is stronger even if the Republican Party is gaining elsewhere. Now, if Republicans were to hold on to Virginia or win in Virginia, it would be an upset. And if they even lose by 5 points rather than 10, it will help argue that Trump-style messaging remains viable in swing regions. And in New Jersey, the higher stakes battleground, if Citrali can pull off an upset, it undercuts the notion that Trump endorsements are harmful in blue states and gives momentum to Republican hopes for 2026. A blowout loss for Republicans in either state gives the other party a national narrative boost. A narrow loss might feel like a near miss, but Democrats will try to frame it as a holding in hostile terrain, while Republicans may frame it as close despite long odds. So what does it all mean for MAGA? Look, Trump has backed Citrali in New Jersey, and if Citrali loses, critics will argue that MAGA's brand is a drag in a more moderate suburban context. The results will test whether MAGA's themes on immigration, America First, anti-woke culture fights, gain traction or backfire in non-red battlegrounds. Weak results showing will affect how much the Republican candidates attach themselves to Trump in 2026. And a weak night could make some distance themselves from the core MAGA. Now, if GOP, which is the grand old party, the Republican Party, if they win or they perform well, Trump and his allies will tout it as vindication. And if they lose big, it emboldens inter-party critics to push for recalibration or seek alternative paths. Now, tomorrow's result will be dissected for clues about 2026, which party is rising, which messages stick, and how Democratic base voters behave, and whether Trump's grip remains as strong as it was last year. If Democrats sweep, they will claim a mandate and a signal of GOP weakness outside of Trump's core base. If Republicans win New Jersey or reduce losses in Virginia dramatically, they'll argue that GOP remains alive and Trump's playbook retains the punch. Either way, these races will shape strategy, morale, and fundraising heading into midterms. We will be watching these results very closely and decode what it means for India and the world right here on Desi from DC. And to discuss more, we've got the Honorable Dr. Rohit Sharma, former Assistant Secretary of the Air Force and former Air Force pilot. He's currently the President and CEO of Falcon Innovation and Aerospace Defense and Strategy firm. Honorable Rohit Sharma, thank you so much for joining us.
Rohit, it's an honor to be here on such an important couple of days in our nation.
A lot of independents and a lot of people who are undecided voters watching this right now in Virginia, in DC, Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, New York, everywhere. What would you tell them, to those people who are going on polls in all these states? Why should they vote for a Democratic candidate?
I would tell them that we hear you. We know that there's been a lot of discussion about Democrats and what the future holds. And to me, it goes back many years ago when the last time we had a difficult election in 2016, there was a man standing in front at the podium and telling us that, hey, we've got to get back to our roots. We've got to listen to the American people. That individual was Joe Biden, of course. And that's when I knew that individuals who want to get to work and serve is going to be important. We have leaders that are ready to do that. And now, if you're looking for lower healthcare prices, go to Abigail. If you're looking to making sure that your businesses are going to prosper, go to Gazala Hashmi. If you're looking for an opportunity for a better education, go to Abigail Spanberger. Across the ticket, you're going to see a focus on your issues. We're not focused on distractions. And that's the one thing that our opponents have been focused on, undermining underrepresented communities. And also that includes immigrant communities. Just latest coming out of Doge, a statement that says, stop importing Indians. Those are distractions. Those are distractions for our community. Our community wants to understand how we can have a better life going forward. My father came to this country with little over $200 in his pocket. And some folks have come to this country with a lot less. 80% of it went to his education. Education is important. The rest went to the livelihood of our household. Now, when I was confirmed a few years ago, I had the chance to bring my father to the Pentagon for my swearing-in ceremony. And when I looked across, he actually drove to Washington, D.C. for an opportunity to serve in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, to which he was successful and it worked out great. But he dropped us off at the Lincoln Memorial of all places. And when I brought him to the Pentagon for my swearing-in, you can go up the steps, which look over all of D.C. And I said, hey, Dad, look what you did in one generation. That's where you dropped us off. And that's where you walked up to the Capitol and met a guy named Hubert Humphrey, who gave you a shot at the American dream. And my dad turned around and he had tears in his eyes. That's the gravity of what this means, what this moment means for our nation. And so I would encourage all voters to cast a ballot, vote your conscience. But if I were to make an ask, it would be to vote for Abigail Spanberger, Gazala Hashmi, and Jay Jones, because they're the ones that are going to fight for you day in and day out.
All right, Honorable Rohit Sharma, thank you so much for speaking with us. Good luck with the campaign, and we hope to have you back soon after the results of the election.
It's an honor, Rohit, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Thank you. To watch the full interview with Secretary Chaudhary, you can go to India Today Global on YouTube and watch how he explains why he's helping candidates win in Virginia. And that wraps up tonight's edition of Desi from DC. This is Rohit Sharma for India Today Global. And do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button before you leave. Stay tuned, stay informed, and as always, stay curious.